Hi, welcome to Mondays with Michelle, a sanctuary where we unite to inspire hope and peace through engaging discussions about mental health, relationships, and parenting. I'm Michelle, your guide through the sanctuary. I'm a mental health therapist with over 14 years of experience, an aspiring author currently querying agents, a peacemaker, and an advocate for those without a voice. Today, we will be discussing the shadow, including dialectics and integration. We will be beginning with our card. Since we're talking about the shadow, I chose the Inner Child deck by Amanda Lynn Aisling. And the card I drew for us is disappointment is not the end. There is hope even in the darkest of nights. What beautiful imagery on there. It really was a good card for the topic today of the shadow. So there is more. There's a book with this deck. So I'll let you know a little bit more about disappointment is not the end. Disappointment can be a difficult emotion to experience, and afterward, it can be hard to have hope again. It is okay to be disappointed. Disappointment is an aspect of life that is inevitable, and being human is a messy journey, full of twists and turns. We do the best we can with the knowledge we have, but not everything turns out as we hope. In truth, no disappointments or mistakes make us any less of the beautiful, wonderful people that we are. If you have pulled this card, it might be a sign that the fear of disappointment is hindering your path. Practice courage and acceptance. There is always hope, beloved, and happiness is waiting for you just ahead. Then there's an acceptance exercise. If you feel fear around disappointment or have experienced disappointment, then it might be good to practice developing acceptance around it. If we are unable to accept that a disappointment has occurred, it can cause prolonged pain. By avoiding the reality of our disappointment, it may feel as though we are protecting ourselves from pain, but it will ultimately hinder our ability to go after what we desire in the future. Try to accept that disappointments will come and go, and know that you are strong enough to try again. Do not let disappointment or the fear of being disappointed stop you from living your glorious life. And then we have a responsive journaling prompt. When you think about disappointment, how does it feel in your body? Do you experience feelings of anxiety or fear? Ask your inner child how they feel about disappointment, and if there is anything you can do to help them feel more accepted and loved around disappointments. And that is absolutely beneficial to our conversation today because we're going to be talking about the importance of acceptance and loving ourselves to be able to integrate our shadow. So, on that note, let's go ahead and dive in. So, we'll start by talking about dialectics. So, when I was writing this, it was around the time of the autumn equinox, the balance between night and day. And that's what dialectics are. It's the balance between opposites or opposing viewpoints like day and night, light and dark, and give and take. So, as we enter into the time of increased darkness, kind of what's referred to as shadow season. It's a good time to delve into our personal internal shadow. So, Carl Jung developed this concept of the shadow where the self in the inner circle, he identified ourself, our mental state, as kind of a circle within a circle. So, the inner circle of the self is on the conscious side, the ego, and then the unconscious side is the shadow. So the dialectic there is between the ego and the shadow. So we find balance by integrating the both of those because we need both parts of ourself there. So, how do things get into the shadow is a concept called repression. So, when we do something wrong or we're not allowed to talk about something, especially during childhood, but even in adulthood, we push it down or repress it into the shadow. So, what is the shadow? It's the part of our unconscious where our fears, unacceptable desires, violent impulses, and shameful and traumatic experiences are stored. So, like I talked about, Jung had the model of the psyche, which is a circle within a larger circle. And I talked about that inner circle where we have the ego in our consciousness and then our shadow in the unconsciousness. So then the outer circle of that is we have our persona, the part of our psyche that we portray or present to the outer world. And then below the shadow, in the depths of the unconscious, is concepts he called the anima and the animus, which is deeper into our inner world. Um, I won't be talking about the animus or anima today, but maybe another article at some point in time will describe that. So that's how he describes. So that shadow, like I said, is the part of our unconscious just below kind of the line that splits our conscious awareness from our unconscious. The unconscious is the part of ourself that we're not aware of, but the shadow is the most easily accessible of the parts of the unconscious. So we can delve into the shadow and explore it and bring pieces up to integrate it into our self concept. So it's important to explore the shadow because it's the part of ourself that creates reactions when we experience triggers. So a trigger is a person, place, or situation that results in emotional outbursts or experiencing intense reactions. So if you do experience kind of a bigger reaction than what you were expecting to experience, then something around you was triggered something that's held within your shadow. And then our shadow also shows itself to the world through a process called projection. Projection happens when you see someone doing something that reminds you of something held within your shadow. And when we see somebody doing something that reminds you of your shadow, you can experience that intense reaction, like a strong dislike of the person. And so we project our own shadow, our own experiences, our own fears, violent impulses, unacceptable desires, and those shameful or traumatic experiences that are held within the shadow. We project those onto another person. That tends to result in us not liking that person, unfortunately, or having a strong reaction towards them. The shadow also shows itself through self sabotage. Self sabotage is basically self-destructive behaviors or negative cycles that we get ourselves in. Um, so, self sabotage tends to happen when things are going really well, we're making progress, we're accomplishing our goals, but something within our shadow then becomes triggered or activated, and it makes us feel very uncomfortable. It's kind of our fear of success. And so when we start to experience success, we self sabotage, we kind of self destruct. We can also engage in self sabotage through some of those negative cycles. That might be cycles of addiction, cycles of self harm, cycles of maybe lack of self care, overworking yourself. So there's a lot of different negative cycles or patterns that we can get ourselves in that are related to self destruction. And then another way we can self sabotage through the shadow is through destructive relationship patterns. This happens when we attract partners who reflect aspects of our shadow. So, those are those cycles. They tend to be intergenerational cycles that tend to repeat over and over again. So people may find themselves attracting partners who may be engaged in domestic violence because they were exposed to domestic violence during their childhood. So then they attract partners with those same behaviors. Because they didn't address the domestic violence that they witnessed during their childhood, it was repressed into the shadow. So, how do we deal with the shadow so we're not, experiencing these emotional outbursts, intense reactions, so we're not projecting onto other people, and so we're not self sabotaging, and we can break harmful cycles? So, we'll talk about 3 ways to integrate our shadow into our self concept, our kind of bringing it into our conscious um, from our unconscious into our conscious awareness. So, the first part of integration is self awareness. That's identifying triggers, the people, places, and situations that trigger those intense emotional reactions. Other triggers may be characteristics you find unappealing in yourself and others. And triggers may also be feelings of resentment or envy towards others. So, what situations, people, or places create those reactions and those emotions within us? So, be self aware of our triggers. And then we move to self acceptance. We welcome all aspects of ourselves, including our strengths and weaknesses. So we accept those past situations that occurred, pretty much our fears, our unacceptable desires, our violent impulses, and shameful or traumatic experiences. We accept all of those as part of ourself. Instead of trying to hide them or pretend that they didn't happen, we accept that they happened and work to integrate them into ourself. And the third way to be able to integrate the shadow into the self is creativity. As I talked about that line in between our conscious awareness, and our unconscious. So, creativity is really the staircase between those 2 different levels. So, if you think about it as a house, on the main floor, where maybe we spend most of our time, is our conscious awareness. And then down in the basement, where maybe we don't go as often, is our shadow. So, creativity is that staircase that lets us go between the 2 different floors of our home. So, any sort of creative activity, poems, songs, music, art, theater, any form of art or any sort of creative expression allows us to express the emotions that are held within the shadow and integrate the shadow into our self concept. So basically, creativity is that staircase that lets us walk it up and down in between the floors. So, let's say today we want to use our creativity to walk downstairs and explore our fears. So we go downstairs, we get the tote that's labeled with our fears, and we can carry it back up into our consciousness. And then creativity allows us to then express those fears in a way that integrates it into our self concept, and it expresses those fears in a way that we can not only heal ourselves, but we can also relate to other humans, and humans can relate to us. It can be a form of connection when we share our work with other humans. All right. So that's it for the conversation about the shadow. So, as far as our activity for the day, you can fold a piece of paper. So, you can grab any sort of notebook paper or, printer paper, whatever you have around you. So, you just take a piece of paper and you can fold it in half the long way. I'm getting my fuzzies off of my paper. So fold it in half the long way. So you have a piece of paper and you can open it up. On one side of your paper, write down your strengths. If identifying your strengths is hard for you, there's a lot of worksheets or strengths lists where you can find some words that may resonate with you for strengths. So you may be kind, compassionate, loving, honest, caring, artistic, creative, athletic. Just identify those strengths and write them down on one side of the piece of paper. So then on the other side of your paper, write your weaknesses. Those could also be your triggers, but there are things inside of you. So on that side of your paper, write down things you consider to be weaknesses. Maybe it's things that you're critical of in yourself. Maybe it's things you judge yourself for. Things that you don't feel like maybe you're good enough. So write those down. And then, keeping the paper open. On the bottom of the paper, write the affirmation, I welcome and accept all aspects of myself without judgment or criticism. So again, on one side of your paper, you'll have your strengths, and on the other side of the paper, your weaknesses, things you judge yourself or criticize yourself for. And then on the bottom of the paper, all the way across, I welcome and accept all aspects of myself without judgment or criticism. So then also create an intention this week to implement meditation to sit with unpleasant emotions, thoughts, or urges sometime this week. So even if it's a minute or two, ideally 5 to 10 minutes, sit with an unpleasant emotion. Maybe it's fears. Maybe it's emotions related to a shameful or traumatic experience. Maybe it's other unpleasant memories. Maybe it's sitting with some unacceptable desires that you have, or unacceptable impulses that you don't want to have. Just sit with those. Spend a couple minutes and sit with unpleasant emotions, thoughts, or urges. And then our reflection for the week is consider a recent conflict with someone important in your life. Take a moment to reflect on the emotions and thoughts that arose during this interaction. How might you have been projecting your own feelings or insecurities onto the other person? Reflect on the past experiences that this situation may have evoked for you. What memories or unresolved issues were stirred by the conflict or triggered by the conflict? Explore how these underlying triggers influenced your perception and reactions in the moment. How might they have clouded your judgment or affected the dynamics of the situation? So journal about those questions, and they're below if you didn't get them written down while I was talking. No worries, just scroll down after listening to the podcast and you'll be able to see those questions and things to reflect upon. Okay, so if you have any questions about the shadow, you can put those in the comments. Next week, we will be talking about balance in relationships. I also have something exciting coming on October 13th. So, my 6-week course, Awakening Tranquility, is going to be starting on Monday, October 13th, and that's for my paid Substack subscribers. So if you're not a paid subscriber, go ahead and upgrade your subscription to be able to access that. Like I said, it's going to be a 6-week course. The goal is to cultivate a more peaceful, centered, and relaxed self. So whether you're looking to alleviate daily stress or seeking to deepen self-awareness, this course will provide you with the tools to navigate life's challenges with greater ease and grace. And I look forward to seeing all of you there. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this week's episodes of Mondays with Michelle on Delving into the Shadow. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. Have a good one.